What's up, everyone? Welcome to Lowered Expectations. Thanks for lowering your expectations and hanging out with me here. I do appreciate it. In today's video, we are taking a deep dive into diesel heaters, specifically looking very closely at the burn chambers. I have had a whole bunch of people ask me about mounting orientation of these heaters, and so I'm going to talk to you guys about why you can and can't mount these in different ways. We are going to take a very close look inside of burn chambers that I've actually cut apart and talk about how they actually work. We are going to talk about a burn chamber that I am modifying to hopefully burn waste motor oil. And we are going to pull apart a 2 kilowatt and a 5 kilowatt heater and take a close look and compare them to each other. Although the 5 kilowatt heater is slightly larger, they come apart in the exact same way. The 2 kilowatt is a little harder to get apart, so I'm going to actually show it on camera. Simply screw off the end cap here, remove the lid, and then this is the trickiest part of the whole job, and that is actually getting the heater out of the case, out of the plastic case. For some reason, they fit really snug. I've had this out of here twice now, and both times it has been a real struggle. It helps if you remove the rubber gasket from the end, but that's not actually what's holding it in. Okay, the end cap is starting to come off here, so I'm just going to pull it off. And you guys might be able to see now why this is so tricky. This is actually quite a snug fit. Okay, that did make it considerably easier. Now that we have it out of the case, let's remove the bolt that holds the ECU on. This is a 3mm on this particular heater. And the ECU here is plastic, so you want to make sure when you tighten this back up not to over tighten it, or that will crack. With the 5 kilowatt, again, this is easier. It seems that they've packaged everything a little tighter on the 2 kilowatt. So there's this little clasp thing here on the 2 and the 5. And it looks like a belt buckle type thing where you would squeeze it together and then pull it apart. And would you look at that, it does work. Now what we want to do is disconnect the fan motor. So we release that, and then the heat sensor wire. And the last thing we do is release the glow plug. You don't have to do them in this order. So this is the ECU. There's the number on it for anyone who is curious. I'm not sure if that tells you anything whatsoever. Let's pop the fan housing off now. This heater has been put through some kind of torture testing, I would call it. And so it might be a little bit carboned up inside of the burn chamber. Perfectly clean inside of there. Set that aside in a safe place if there is such a thing in my shop. Now you want to remove the rubber boot so that you can get the glow plug out. And you want to be careful when you're he said as he broke something. I've literally done this hundreds of times and have never broken a glow plug before. And this one snapped off. You guys just saw that. Okay, so I'm able to get a 12mm wrench on there just barely and get this glow plug out, or the remainder of this glow plug. So this is the remainder of the glow plug. Has a little bit of white ashy stuff on it, as you guys may be able to see there. When I started to remove the glow plug, I was saying that you should be careful. What I was actually referring to wasn't breaking it off, but actually causing the wires to touch together and short, or just bending the wires too much, too many times, and actually causing them to break off the glow plug. I've literally had glow plugs out hundreds of times, and this is the first time I've ever had one break. We are going to see if we can save this gasket. Hopefully we can. Okay, there we go. Gasket is saved. The 2 kilowatt burn chamber does only have 3 bolts, where the 5 kilowatt has 4 bolts. I can't believe the glow plug broke. I literally put my other glow plug in my lathe and machined the threaded part off without damaging my glow plug. Okay, let's pull the burn chamber out and take a look at it. I don't know if I've already mentioned it, but I have been experimenting with this heater, and so there might be a bit of soot in here just from it running too rich, or from it being choked basically. Let's pull it out, and it looks surprisingly clean. I now have the 5 and 2 kilowatt heaters disassembled, and although this video is specifically about the burn chambers, I am going to go over a little bit of this stuff in detail, the exchanger and the fan housings. I'll try not to let it drag on too long, but I'll go over it pretty quickly. So this is the fan assembly for the 5 kilowatt. This is the 2 kilowatt. You can tell because it's much smaller. This is the combustion air fan that pulls in air for the combustion process. And this is the fan that moves air over the heat exchanger to actually push air out the vent so that you get hot air circulating in whatever space you're in. A lot of people don't get this, but there is one motor with a shaft on each end, and that controls at the same rate your combustion air and the air that goes over the exchanger. So anytime you increase the heat level, it turns the fan a bit faster on the heat exchanger and draws in more combustion air. If you're interested in purchasing your very own 2 or 5 kilowatt diesel heater or a Viver endoscope, there will be affiliate links as well as discount codes in the description below. I'm now going to attempt to explain the function of these heaters, starting with the airflow, and then we will come back to the fuel. I'm sure I will miss a few things, so if you have questions, feel free to ask me in the comment section below, and I will do my best to answer. So this is the exhaust port, and this is the inlet port. We've already had a look at the fan housing. The inlet port is attached to the fan housing and comes out behind the fan. This is a centrifugal fan that blows the air out through this area, and because this is sitting on the heat exchanger with a gasket and grommets for the fuel line and glow plug, the air is forced into the backside of the burn chamber. This is a baffle, and there are fins that introduce some sort of spiral to the air as it goes into the main burn area. I have a highly modified burn chamber here that I can use to show you guys some of this stuff in a little bit better view. These holes aren't normally there, and the fins have been removed, so you can see there are no fins on the back of this chamber. So ordinarily that would be the case. The air goes in through here. There are some slots in there to allow the air to pass through, and this is what I call the primary burn area or the main burn area. There is a baffle here. These holes are not normally there, and neither is that slot. The air then goes out through the baffle into what I call the burn tube. When the hot gases are exiting the end of the burn tube, they travel very close to the heat exchanger. I will try to get you guys a shot with my endoscope to show you how close it really is. The exhaust gases come out the end of the tube and stick very close to the inside of the heat exchanger walls, between the outside of the burn tube and the fins on the outside, or I guess inside of the heat exchanger. The idea is that those gases give off the heat to the heat exchanger, and then that heat is carried off into your living space. If you guys are interested in one of these inspection cameras from Viver, feel free to check out the description below. I will try to remember to leave an affiliate link as well as a discount code. Let's take a closer look inside of this exhaust port at the burn chamber and heat exchanger. There you can see the weld seam on the burn chamber itself. Hopefully you guys can make out how close the edge of the exhaust port is to the burn chamber itself. I'm going to go in and touch up against the burn chamber, and then we will switch views to camera B. And in camera B you can actually see the burn tube along the right hand side of the screen and the fins along the left hand side. So you can see there how close the burn chamber actually is to the heat exchanger. Now that we've finished talking about the way the combustion air moves through the heater, we are going to move on to fueling, and I'm sure this is going to cause quite the stir in the comment section below. You can choose to believe me and my experience, or you can listen to some guy on a blog post who has never actually owned a diesel heater and is making a bunch of assumptions. That is completely up to you. I personally don't care. If you don't agree, get down in the comment section and let me know for sure. Before we get into that, however, I am going to explain to you guys why it is very important to orient your heater or mount your heater in the right way, and why it is not just a simple yes or no answer when you ask me, can I mount it on its side or can I mount it on its one end or the other end or whatever. So here I have a 2 kilowatt, 5 kilowatt, and highly modified 5 kilowatt burn chamber that I am going to show you guys. There are a couple of differences. I mean, it's pretty obvious that the 2 kilowatt and the 5 kilowatt different in size, but what we're talking about here is what I call the flame initiation hole. And I'm not sure if that's exactly what you call it, but that's what I call it. On the modified burn chamber, you can actually see this hole quite clearly because it's in the face of it here. And this hole is to allow some air to pass in onto the glow plug to actually start the burn before it goes into the main burn area. So the fuel comes in through here, goes onto a mesh by the glow plug, and a little bit of air comes in through there. This whole area is pressurized by the fan, and so air goes in through there, and that helps the combustion process start. Well, the location of this hole is what determines whether or not, partly what determines whether or not you can mount the heater on its side or on its back or however. If you look at this burn chamber, you can see the the flame initiation hole is actually in the side. And because it's in the side, what this means is I cannot mount the heater like this, or the fuel would run out through that hole. On this heater, I can't mount it standing up on end, or the fuel would run out through that hole. So I'm constantly telling people that you need to take your heater apart and actually look at it and see where this hole is. That is the hole that I'm talking about, and depending on where that hole is determines whether or not you can mount your heater in a certain way. Hopefully that clears things up. There are a few pretty common misconceptions when it comes to the glow plug mesh, and the glow plug area where the fuel comes in and runs into the main burn chamber. And I'm going to try to clear some of that stuff up. Hopefully I don't just add more confusion. I would like to make things better and not worse. So here we go. The first one, most people know, but I do see quite frequently in my comment section, is people assuming that the glow plug stays on and actually initiates the burn the whole time, and that is not the case. The glow plug turns on for about 2 minutes. What happens is when you hit the power button, the glow plug turns on, it stays on for about a minute, and then the fuel pump starts. Once the fuel pump starts, the glow plug stays on for about another minute, and then it turns off. The heater continues to run, and then when you power the heater down, the glow plug actually turns back on to burn fuel off of the glow plug and the mesh area. So that brings me to the next thing that a whole lot more people assume, and that is that the burn is actually initiated while the heater is running inside of the glow plug area, and that is simply not the case. Once the heater is actually up and running and the glow plug shuts off, the burn is actually happening inside of the primary burn area. And I am fairly confident of this because although I don't recommend you do it, I have killed power to my heater a few times and then taken the heater apart. And if you do so, the glow plug mesh and the glow plug itself will be wet from diesel fuel. If that area is where the burn actually initiated while the heater was running, then that would be hot enough to flash off diesel fuel. So that is the second thing. The next thing is that the fuel line comes into the glow plug area with a complete open orifice. There is no restriction, and the fuel does not squirt or pulse in there. It simply drools in onto the glow plug mesh, and that is how the fuel basically enters the system. Once the heater is running, it goes onto the mesh just because the mesh is still there, and it drools down without burning into the primary burn area where it ignites on that wick, and that's how it works. Fight me in the comments. As I believe I've already mentioned, there is a mesh that goes in around the outside of the glow plug. This is basically a wick for the diesel so that it doesn't just run down into the main burn area. They want it to hang out around the glow plug so that it actually has time to ignite. This also allows it to spread out over a wider area and give it more of a chance to actually ignite there as well. So this sits down inside of the glow plug hole. I'm not going to push this one in. I specifically took this one out of this burn chamber so that I can show you guys the passageway. We are actually going to use the Viver endoscope again, or inspection camera again, to take a look down in here so that we can see a couple of things. There is another mesh down in here that sits in the main burn area, or the primary burn area. I have removed it from this one and thrown it in the garbage a long time ago. It was spot welded into this one as it is to these other ones as well. And so this is not a serviceable part in most burn chambers. I have been told by a few people that you can actually get replacements, and some of these actually come apart and you can put a new wick or mesh in there. But I have not seen a burn chamber that does that yet. Let's use the Viver inspection camera to take a closer look inside of the glow plug hole. We can actually see the mesh already. But as you guys can see, there is a large opening. The part that you can see directly ahead that is very white and reflecting light back at the camera, that is simply the end of where they drill the hole for the glow plug. And off to the bottom is basically a giant gaping hole that goes in onto the mesh area inside of the main burn area, or the primary burn area. So the fuel simply drools in through here around the glow plug, and if we back up enough, hopefully we will be able to see where the fuel actually comes in. And it is actually to the the right side of the screen. You can kind of make out that shiny part. That is actually where the fuel comes in. I've now switched over to my original Viver diesel heater burn chamber, and although it is highly modified, there are no modifications done to where the fuel comes in. The reason why I switched to this one is because it is quite dirty, and the contrast allows you, or hopefully will allow you, to see where the fuel line actually comes in. The fuel line comes in on the top, just off to the left-hand side. It is almost too close to focus, but hopefully you guys can see that. There is no nozzle, there is no restriction whatsoever. It comes in at the full size of the tube, and as a result, the fuel simply drools in out of there onto the mesh. There is no squirting or injecting. It has nothing to do with pressure. Fight me in the comments. We are now going to take a quick look inside the opening of the burn tube and see if we can see into the main burn area, or the primary burn area, and actually see that mesh. As you guys can see around the outside of the baffle, we can quite clearly see that mesh material. This is what a brand new 5 kilowatt chamber looks like. As you guys can see, this is the baffle right here. That is the end of the piece where the air comes in with all the slots in it. It looks like it either has a number 6 or a number 9. And you can quite clearly see that mesh that goes all the way around the inside of the primary burn area. I now have the burn chamber back in the 2 kilowatt heater, and it is very hard to see the flame initiation hole. It definitely won't be able to be picked up on camera, but it is sitting in between the wall of the exchanger here and the inside of the glow plug hole there. So because of that, we know the hole is there. The heater ordinarily sits with the exhaust port pointing down. But if you wanted to mount this on one of its sides, you need to make sure that that hole is facing up. So what I've done is I've marked up on the side of the heat exchanger, and that way I know if I'm going to put this on its side, I put it this way with this side facing up. Heaters with flame initiation holes in the side of the glow plug hole are able to be mounted on one side, but one side only. You can mount the heater with that hole pointing up, but if you mount it with that hole pointing down, the fuel will run out. These heaters, from all of my testing, are able to be run in the upward position. So this side facing down, that means hot air blowing up, cool air being pulled in the bottom. However, this burn chamber, my original Vevor heater, had the flame initiation hole in this spot, and therefore it cannot be run in this orientation. If you tried to run it with the hot air going up out, pulling cold air in the bottom, that would actually cause the diesel to run out the bottom and get all over the inlet fan and just cause a huge mess. I have also tried to run these heaters with the tube facing down, so hot air going down out of the heater, and that doesn't work at all. I don't know for sure, but my hypothesis is that the fuel actually runs out too quickly of the main burn area or the primary burn area, and the combustion process starts to happen in the secondary or the burn tube, and I think that causes all sorts of problems. So I can't say that for sure, but I can tell you that they do not work well with the burn tube facing down or the hot air basically being blown out the bottom. This is what a whole bunch of you have been waiting for. Many of you who follow my channel have done so for a very long time, and you will know that I did a whole bunch of waste oil burning experiments. And none of those experiments went terribly well. We learned lots along the way, but it always ended up with the same result, with a huge amount of soot and ash building up inside of the burn chamber, which would then lead to the heater flaming out or just working very poorly and making a ton of smoke. So I have decided, I've been planning on doing this for quite some time, and then was kind of kicked into high gear by seeing what Dave McLucky has been working with. If you haven't seen his videos, he started a series where he's been trying to burn waste motor oil very methodically. He's got his fans involved, and he is working on building a waste oil heater or waste oil burner with some diesel heater parts. I'm going to try to keep it confined, at least this project, I'm going to try to keep confined inside of a diesel heater body, but at some point in the future you may see there is a propane tank sitting over there. I am planning on building a waste oil heater as well that uses diesel heater components to keep it running. So I've already tried to explain this to the camera once. This is pretty tricky to explain, but I'm going to do my best, so just bear with me. So we've already discussed how the burn chamber works. We have fuel and air coming in through here, comes out through the main or primary burn area. There is a baffle. It comes out through the baffle and out through the burn tube. The issue that we're having when we're trying to burn waste motor oil is that the waste motor oil builds up inside of the main burn area here, and then the air can't actually flow out through the baffled area because that disturbs the airflow. And these things are very fussy to any sort of disturbance in the airflow. So what I have chosen to do, I've been working on this both in my head and in the physical world, as you guys can see. These are actual pieces. I didn't film any of this because I was just trying to get things done and I just wasn't in the mood to film. But inside of there, you can see there is a pointy thing, kind of like arrowhead maybe. And that is to help the air flow smoothly and come out through these slots in the periphery of this thing. I just tried to use a fancy word, periphery, and I hope I used it in the right way. This is hopefully going to be a drop-in modification where you can drop these pieces. It's actually going to be one part when I'm finished. But the idea is you will be able to drop this one part into your burn chamber and then do a modification to your heat exchanger and then maybe burn waste oil. We are going to give it a go. I'm kind of excited about this, and I know a bunch of you will be as well. I plan on doing some tests with vegetable oil, bacon fat, and a couple of other things, perhaps before I actually test this. I have received 3 new burn chambers, and so I can afford not monetarily, but I can afford to actually chance wrecking one of these burn chambers and still have a heater to test with other things. So I now have 4 working burn chambers, and in more exciting news, I have ordered a other heater. So I actually paid for it with my own money. This is an 8 kilowatt heater, and I believe it is actually going to put out somewhere around 7 kilowatts. So you guys can expect to see a video on that in the near future. I didn't get it from Viver, which is why I paid for it with my own money. And so, yeah, remember to like the video and get involved in the comment section. That is going to do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you next time.